climb up while they're watching. It's fine.
Okay. Oh, I should have my water with me as well. And some chocolate.
I'm going to be eating my cashew nuts.
Oh, and my book.
Okay. We have an amazing view down here, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else? You know what? Let me close that water bottle because I can see myself tripping it over.
I hope this is good.
Okay.
Maybe I need to talk a bit like clearer. Mia's just laughing at me in the background.
In the background.
Huh? Data. My data.
What data do you have for us to discuss today? Okay, yeah, Tavisha, what are we going to be talking about today?
Okay, so I've been reading this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's really interesting. Actually, it's a lot more about. I should have got a little. Okay, I'm gonna get my own notebook in a bit. Once I start introducing what we're talking about.
Oh yes, because I realize people do this on their channel a lot. Like, if this is the first video you're watching of the time,
I'm Tavisha.
And I'm Farida, and we're just going to be discussing some things on this channel. So, yes, today is episode 2.
Yeah. So I was reading this book, and it was talking about. So it talks a lot about utility theory. So it talks about a lot about economic theory and decision making. So decision theorists, and it's so interesting. Honestly, 10 out of 10 would recommend read. Like one of the best books I've read. It's just the way that it's structured is just insane. Like I don't know how he's managed to like put his whole lifetime worth of teaching into one book. It literally makes no sense.
And so, how is it structured?
He's got like different.
I guess we're not doing our thingy thing. I don't like it anyway.
Yeah.
I guess we can have our water bottle.
He's got like different sections and then different subsections within that, and each chapter is quite short. Each chapter is maybe like 4 or 5 pages where he just
really
yeah.
The book is that thick, and each chapter. How many chapters are in this?
Maybe like 40.
Damn.
But it talks about everything in such like detail. Like right now I'm on chapter like 35.
When you say everything, what do you mean? Because like I know Think Fast because like it's on my reading list. But if you don't know what this book is about, Tavish, can you tell people what is Thinking Fast and Slow?
So Thinking Fast and Slow, it basically first describes the 2 mechanisms in your brain. First one thinks fast and the second one thinks slow. So that's basically the title of the book. It's like Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's a super cool book. I initially bought it because I struggle a lot with like overthinking sometimes, and so I was like, oh, maybe this will help me learn how to slow down my thoughts. But it mostly just it kind of explains your brain as a system, which is like one is the user face and the second is the code. So that's really interesting. That's the way I understood it anyway.
I was gonna say, please elaborate, because like this is a book that's on my reading list, and I wanted to read it because like so many people have recommended it, from Ali Abdaal to I think it's like the guy, the Veritasium YouTube channel of Ali Abdaal and Veritasium.
Yeah.
YouTube channel. My understanding of like the summary that people gave is like, you know, you have I think it's like mode 1 and mode 2 way of thinking. So like mode 1 is like the quick one where like it doesn't really like use evidence and stuff. It just goes like, you know, what's the straightforward thing I can see? That's like the quick thinking part. And then the other slow one is the one where like it actually, you know, uses experiences and things you've gone through, but it's slower. But it actually gives you more, gives you better conclusions. I don't know.
I would say that mode 1, so in this book it's described as system 1 and system 2. So I'd say system 1 is more, it does use evidence, but quicker than you would even think about the evidence. So it's kind of like your gut instinct or this feeling that you get. It's your system 1 recognizing things that are maybe a bit off. Like perhaps you've been in this situation before and your system 1 recognizes it way before your system 2 even understand what's going on. You know, like I'm trying to think.
So that's what's it like bad vibes.
Bad vibes, yeah. It's not because you're getting some mystical vibe off that person. It's literally because they are displaying characteristics which you've seen times before, and now your system 2 has that in its code, and so your system 1 immediately uses that to decipher. Okay, this person's bad vibes. I don't even need to tell you why. I don't even need to come up with a reason. It's just the reason is already there.
Your bad vibes.
Yeah, you're just bad vibes. But your system. But the thing is, you can accept or deny what system 1 is saying. So you could think, oh, this person's bad vibes. Now your system 2 can choose to accept or deny. So now this will come under like critical thinking. So why is this, now it comes to questioning yourself, why is this person bad vibes? What characteristics have I picked up on? Is my understanding of these characteristics accurate? Is there a reason for this characteristics which I've not taken into account, you know, that perhaps could explain in this particular situation why they acted this way? It's not just like a broad like umbrella that they fall under. Yeah. So now your system 2 is the codes. If you can change the code, you change the user interface completely. Sort of like, not completely, but you can make it easier.
When you say user interface, is that like a phrase that you use in the book?
No, this is just how I understand it.
When I think of user interface, I'm thinking like this is where the user actually interacts with the code. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
Oh, I'm thinking more like
it can't just do anything without code.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously, the user interface is super quick. Like when you want to submit something, you just press the button submit. You're not thinking about all the code that's going behind changing the page, loading the page. You know, it's just kind of like enter your name, enter this, enter that. It's just being entered into the fields. You're not like sat there behind like going, okay, print this, print that, you know.
So I think you mean like it's more like a method. So I think like the way you're describing is kind of like system 1 is like the method for doing things, where like system 2 is like the bank, where like whatever the method thing actually goes to. So like the method of like so system 1 just executes, it doesn't process. Executing is processing. Those are synonyms.
Yeah, it's kind of like system 1 just makes everything easy and pretty, and system 2 is like the actual, you know, your syntax errors and your stuff that's going on that doesn't really make sense, but somehow your code is still running, you know. And as long as the code runs, the program works. You're not going back and fixing every single thing. You know, like if you have a code and it's not perfect, but it does what you want it to do, you kind of leave it. You don't want to go back and you don't want to start messing with it because that's that, you know. But if you really want to perfect it and you want it to be as simple as possible, and synthesize it as much as possible, you want it to be as quick as possible, now you have to go back and now you have to, you know, really look at every single line. And now you have to be like, okay, this is where this error is. It doesn't affect my overall system processing perhaps, but obviously it does at some point slow the system down, or this code is useless, it doesn't make sense, so maybe I should just take it out. Kind of like that. That's how I understand it.
So system 1, I really need to read this book after you. So system 1 is kind of like the quick stuff, and then system 2 is the stuff that actually like I'm thinking about this in terms of code now because you use code and I'm trying to make it make sense in my head. Okay. I should turn off my phone because we're going to have several alarms. This one is to tell me to check Discord. But I actually don't need this anymore because now I just check Discord because I enjoy Discord.
How's your food? You good?
Okay, so what was the question you had? Because I realized now we're just talking about the book and explaining the context.
Yeah. So the question actually doesn't have much to do with the system. So somehow, this is what I'm saying, this book is genius. Like when I say genius, I mean actual
so I need to read this book
genius.
Today.
Like I think if there's one genius in this world, it's Daniel Kahneman. Like
we have the likes of Einstein and Stephen Hawking.
Okay, yeah, but could they teach what they understand?
Yeah, like I just read A Briefer History of Time. Like,
oh, sure, Stephen Hawking.
You can explain.
Okay, yeah, fine. He's also a genius, but Daniel Kahneman is like.
So you're saying Daniel Kahneman is a certified genius?
It's a certified genius in explaining how these really complicated things work. But the thing is, he's not just talking about. Okay, so if you look at like Stephen Hawking and Einstein, right? What they're studying and what their genius is applies to a very small field in a very small sort of like specialty and very small utility. Like, okay, maybe I can understand everything what Stephen Hawking is saying, but a lot of the reason that people don't take the time to is because this doesn't help me with my life in any way. I understand black holes and I understand the theory of black holes, but this doesn't actually change the way that I look at anything. Maybe in the broader sense, but
it might for some people.
Yeah.
Because like the way because which is one of the things. Oh, I wish I had the book with me. Which is one of the things I really like. Like the concluding paragraph, he talks about how you'd be surprised how many times he referred to like God or the creator in that book. I was actually quite shocked. But in the final paragraph, he mentioned how like before the people who studied like philosophy were also like scientists, because like we're trying to just understand the how whilst we're actually trying to understand the why. But now it's so disparate. Literally what you said. Now the people who are studying that is so far removed from like the people so far removed from people's life, because like the reason they were so intertwined before, like philosophy and science, is like philosophy is trying to understand like why we're here, how do we actually how do we actually live our lives now we're here? Whereas science is trying to understand like what is the like it's like philosophy is the like how did we get here, and then science is like, okay, now we're here, we need to understand the world we're living in. But now some people go into such niche areas of trying to understand the world that we're living in that they don't remember the why we're trying to understand the world we're living in, because the reason we're trying to understand the world that we live in is to understand like how to actually live in it and how to actually live our lives. But yeah,
I think a lot of scientific laws, a lot of scientific explanations, they apply, if you know how to look at it the right way, they apply very directly to life as well. And this is completely another thing. Obviously, this contradicts what I was saying earlier about how like you have to be in like. It will make more sense when I talk more about the book. Like obviously, this contradicts what I was saying earlier about how like if you're really in a niche, it doesn't really affect most people's lives. I think if you know how to look at it the right way, it does, because this is my understanding of intertwining philosophy and science is more like we are here to understand the laws of this earth. That's the way that I see it.
Apply it to our lives.
To apply it to, because I believe in like reincarnation, and like the soul has many lessons to learn throughout many different lifetimes. So I'm thinking in the sense of like, why am I here on this earth right now, and why this earth of all the other, like there are, if you look at the Hubble Space Telescope, there's millions and trillions of galaxies. Like we can't deny that there's other life out there, right? It's like, it's pretty much, there's no way that we're one in a trillion billion, you know, like there's innumerable galaxies we can't even see with our eyes.
Okay, there's no evidence either. What's it called? What's the word? There's no evidence to either prove or disprove that, because like we know they're different galaxies, but we don't know what's in them. And like the whole I don't know if you've heard it before, but there's the name of this guy, his theory where he was like, it's like a whole thing about like trying to find extraterrestrial life forms, like if they did exist, why haven't they like contacted all that other kind of stuff?
Because they're so far away. Like by the time we even get to one of those galaxies, it's what, like 33 trillion years. What bot am I making that's even going to live that long? Like what robot is going to get that far without malfunctioning or without disintegrating? Like you said,
but
we
that's
don't know
assuming. I was going to say that's assuming we're the smartest, right? There might be other people smarter than us that could create a bot, but the thing is, like maybe they don't want to contact us for whatever reason there is. But yeah, sorry.
But there's no material, physical material that can travel that, like whatever. Okay, whatever's out there, right? It's made of the same atoms that we are. That's the thing, right? Because this is a universe and it's made of atoms.
Nothing can, I guess, from reading that book now I know nothing can travel faster than the speed of light.
Yeah.
But you can travel. You can travel as close to the speed of light. But even the things that they've tried to, I don't know, in like particle reactors and stuff, they're trying to accelerate electrons, which are just very tiny. Imagine trying to accelerate like a whole spaceship.
Yeah. It's just the amount of energy that would take is just.
That is also insane. True. Sorry, you were making a point about reincarnation. You were saying something.
Oh yeah. So this is my understanding of reincarnation. In my sense is that why am I here in this? Because I believe there's life forms in many other universes. Bye, good luck. Because like I believe there's life forms in many other universes, and there's a lot more to learn out there. So I'm like thinking, why am I on this earth at this point in time? For what reason? And I think it's genuinely to understand the way that this earth works is something that I need to learn in my personal journey, is to understand the laws of this universe.
When you say that, do you mean like the physical laws or like ethical, societal, what kind of laws?
Like if you look at like which one of Newton's laws is this, first or the third? Was like every action has equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah, I think it's either first or third.
The inertia, right?
I think the first one is F equals ma.
And then the second one is inertia, right? A system that is in movement will stay in movement unless affected by an external force or something like that. Right? And all of those laws actually even apply to yourself physically, mentally. Like everything that you do, every action that you have, everywhere that you put your energy, it's either, it has an equal and opposite reaction sometimes. Like, or even, well, opposite is
basically
maybe not.
Nothing can come from nothing.
Exactly. And say if you are on your trajectory and you're just moving in this path, without some sort of external force, like you're not going to be able to change that trajectory. You know, you're not going to be able to, without, maybe that force can come from within, maybe that force can come from, but like, obviously I don't know the laws off the top of my head right now. It's been a while since I've done physics purely, but I think a lot of the laws that apply to even that apply physically also apply mentally, and the laws are not different from each other.
But like when you were talking about the whole like the force thing and like the mental force and the fact that you need something to change your directory, I'm not sure how they did it in Newton, but when I'm thinking about that mentally, I'm thinking about the fact that sometimes you just spend all the energy there is to continue that force. Like if this is going this way, like at some point the air resistance. Okay, I stopped using physical laws. Anyway, we'll digress back to what we're supposed to be talking about. But like the air resistance will counteract whatever force was causing it to move forward anyway. So even though there wasn't, I guess the air resistance is the other force that has changed it. But sometimes like mentally you just expend all the energy that's left. There's not necessarily a new thing that's coming in to change the directory, but whatever was fueling that has just finished.
That could also happen. I'm not sure what the limitations of that law is, because surely does that take that into account as well? I don't know.
Yeah, it must do, because like I guess it does, like literally when I was saying that like the air resistance is something else that has caused the force to actually stop. But even without air resistance, like some like things can't be in motion forever. I guess that's what the force is trying to say. Okay, we're doing too much physics stuff. Sorry, guys.
Going back
okay.
to
Is it a quote? Like, what is it you were going to ask?
okay, so it's not a quote this time. It's this very cool theory. It's called expectation theory, and how it's like okay, so how it might be a bit complicated because I'm not that great at explaining this stuff because I'm not an economist, and this is the first time I've ever been interested in econ in my life.
Oh, was it you and I were talking about how like people who do econ just like see the world in a different way?
They do, but this is the first time I've understood that econ is a lot of science, and it's a lot of it's actually just a lot of behavioral psychology. Is what I think econ is, and stats. Econ is a mixture of like sociology, stats, behavioral psychology, and maths, which is that's stats.
But didn't they do more maths than stats? Like other aspects of maths that's not stats, like I don't know, probability.
Probably a lot of like equations. Probability is stats though.
Oh yeah, that's true.
A lot of graphs.
I know nothing about econ.
So basically, there's this
supply and demand stuff.
Yeah, there's this like it's called the probability certainty. It's called the certainty effect and the possibility effect, and definitely look this up. It's so interesting. So it's talking about how gains. So if you have 95% chance to win £10,000, fear of disappointment, you're risk averse, and you would accept unfavorable settlement. So say if you're in court and the lawyer says, this is how the book explains it. If you're in court and someone is suing you, you have a greedy sibling. You've inherited $10,000. You have a greedy sibling who's saying, I'm suing you for that. That's rightfully mine. Now, your lawyer says to you, there's a 95% chance you will keep the $10,000 and you will win the case. But obviously, there's a 5% chance you won't because you never know what's going to happen, right? Now, you come to a settlement and the sister says, or the sibling says, fine, you have $10,000. I will accept $900 and we will settle the case, right? At that point, you're accepting a 90% chance. You're accepting just 90% of that.
So you get to keep 90% of 10,000.
Yeah. Okay. Whereas, so you're accepting a loss. You're accepting that loss of £1,000,
but it's a certain loss.
Yeah. So you're accepting that certainty rather than the uncertainty, that 5% chance that you might lose. Sort of. But that doesn't actually make sense, right? Because if there's a 95% chance that you might win, why would you accept any loss? So it talks about how humans value, like we see loss as such a kind of blown out proportion to the point where our minds don't think rationally.
Yeah, because like that's the whole thing with I think like doing neuroscience. Like,
I don't know if I explained that well. So.
Depression or something where it's like you just see, and even obviously in depression, in people who are depressed, it's magnified. But as humans in general, we tend to blow out of, I shouldn't say out of proportion, but we essentially tend to focus more on the negative things. But that kind of makes sense. Like if you think back in the past, this is the place where I find food, this is the place where I don't know, I saw someone get killed. You're obviously going to retain that and be more what's the word, be more moved by or more conscious of or more like should I say stimulated by like the negative thing that happened and the positive thing happened. And I feel like it has positive benefits, right? It's like if you're getting positive and negative feedback, if you focus so much on the positive feedback, like your head will just swell out. But if you focus on negative feedback, you can like, oh, this is what I need to work on to be able to improve this.
Yeah.
But it needs to be done with I shouldn't say with caution, but it needs to be done with intention.
Yeah.
Because you're conscious and intentional about the fact that you know this is happening, as opposed to just letting it happen to you.
Yeah. I think it has positive benefits if we think of it in a way that
What would
there's
you
no
choose?
emotion behind it.
What would you choose?
See this. So this is pen. So it talks
And
about
there's also
risk
four
averse
corners.
and
We
risk
only talked
seeking.
about two.
So this is just the first one actually that we've talked about. So obviously this has positive benefits where you are loss averse, and some people, like you say, feel it more than others because of, and that's what can cause heavy depression as well, where the feeling of losing something is way more potent than the feeling of gaining something.
I know, even like the gain and loss, and also like what you see in things. So like it could be like, you're walking down the street, 10 people said you didn't look nice, one person said how ugly you are, like that is the one that they'd retain the most. So it works for like loss and gain, but also works for like negative and positive view.
But like, see, if there was no emotion behind that statement, you would be like,
you would rationally think, okay, 9 versus 1.
Yeah. 9 versus 1, or like, okay, that one comment, that feedback that I can take on and then change. But what causes the depression is that people, there's so much like emotion behind that. Then you start linking that to other negative things that's happened in your life. You don't actually take a negative occurrence as a singular occurrence. You always kind of link it to every other negative thing that's ever happened in your life.
That's true. I'm thinking like there are different types of, I guess, way people think when they're depressed, and some people like they don't have the energy, things. But I feel like that definitely is one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
no, but we're saying like in the option thing, like which one would you choose? I have £10,000. You use like your whole sibling story. Which one are you going for?
Well, the rational thing to do is to go
Not
for the 95% chance.
Really?
Because you have a 95% chance. That's pretty good odds. Like,
but you have a certainty that I would go for the second option personally.
That's what most people will go for. And obviously, I would probably go for that as well.
I don't see how this is the rational.
Because statistically, why would you take that loss when you have a 95% chance of gaining fully? Like, that's such a small. you're looking at such a small percentage. 95% is really high.
If it was something like, I don't know, 1% or less than 1%, I might go for this one. But it's 90%. Plus, like, I guess maybe the example you gave that it's a sibling, and the fact that you're going to be certain about that money, as opposed to the fact that you could possibly lose everything. It's like, would you rather, like, I don't know what the, I guess, thingy was, like the, what you call it, like expectation probabilities, because like with expectation probability you multiply the amount that you're going to get by the possibility. So I guess if it's like 10, I'll just use not 10,000, I'll just use 10 times 0.95 plus 0 times 0.05, or I'll be getting 9,100, so 9.1 times 0.9 plus so either I'm getting, so what's the other scenario? So either like you keep 9,100 and you give them £900. No, but then you just, exactly, so that means this is the only one that's there, so you just have to, wait, excuse me guys, I'm just calculating.
But that turns out to be 0 anyway.
So this is 9.5, this is your expected outcome, 9.5, and the expected outcome of this is, yeah, because that's your 0. 91 times 9,
but it's not really like that though, because what you're saying is that.
No, but this is like in maths, like in statistics, this is how you calculate the expected outcomes. The expected outcome for the first one is 9.5. The expected outcome for the second one is 8.19. So yeah, rationally we should choose this one. Yeah. Because it has the highest expected outcome of 9.5. Yeah. But most people would end up choosing, me included, I would end up choosing this one. Yeah. Interesting.
Which doesn't make sense if you're looking at losses and gains. Right?
It doesn't make sense, what's it called, statistically and rationally.
But in your head, that loss.
No, I shouldn't say in my head, in my heart. Yeah. Because in my head, like, I can do the maths and see what the math says. But in my heart.
But you're still so loss averse that you don't want to take that risk of losing the entire 10,000.
That it'd end up with less money overall. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that's true. Yeah. So what does he say about this in the book? Like, we should try to be more like number one than number two?
He doesn't talk about that yet. He's just talking about right now he's just talking about how they basically debunked this whole utility theory. And
so what is, I was going to ask you, I wrote that down, what is utility theory?
See, that is a good question, because this was mentioned at the very beginning of the book.
Oh, I was going to say we could use, because last time we had your laptop and we
I
could
have
just...
taken some time. Yeah, I should put that out again.
No.
But it is something.
I'll put my phone out. Because when you said utility theory, like I wrote down neuroeconomics, it was like back in undergrad, I did this. I remember things like Wolfram Schultz, and he basically did like the whole, like, I guess, started the whole field of neuroeconomics, and talking about like using economic theory on things like you were saying, like, loss aversion and stuff, but applying that to like neuroscience. Like, for example, when I guess animals and stuff have the option of, like, if you press this lever, you get like a bitter juice 5% of the time, but as you press this one, you get like a sweet juice like 95% of the time, and seeing like the changes in like neurochemicals. Because like I was doing this the other day, I'm gonna shout out Teaching to Learn server. I'm going to include the link in the description below. But like on Saturday, I had a class where I was learning how to teach people to learn something, and we went into like the neuroscience of it. And dopamine is actually released not due to a reward itself, but due to novelty. So when you're learning something, associating something with a particular reward. And where was I going with this? But he was trying to use neuroeconomics to see how the change in dopamine. So it's not just, so for example, you still release dopamine even though you're getting the bitter juice because you didn't expect it. So you're trying to learn, whenever you're learning something, essentially when dopamine gets released. So even if you're learning that this is the bitter juice and this is like the good juice, and there was like equations and stuff doing like the economics and how, like, the amount of dopamine is released and like the time lag and stuff like that. So yeah, anyway, when my phone comes on, I'm going to search up utility theory. But yeah, I wrote down utility theory in neuroeconomics. I'll see if
I kind of know what it is, but I want to get a proper definition.
Okay, let's see. What do you think it is?
No.
Why not?
Because I've read like this. It took me a long time to get through this book, guys. I started in January and we're in March now. And this is like
the only book you've been reading? You've been reading other books.
Yeah, because I just
but you say it like this is the only book I've been reading. It's taking me.
Oh yeah,
she's also reading the Jordan Peterson book.
I've read a few books.
You finished that one?
Yes, I've read a few books as I was reading this. But
check out her book blog.
Yes, book blog as well. But this is just this is just a lot to wrap your head around. Like, it teaches you a lot.
Oh, so the reason it's taking you a long time, it's not because you're reading other books, it's because it's like hard to read.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you go through one chapter, it's like, wow, you've learned a whole new concept. You want to take some time, you want to sink that in. Like, it takes.
Do you make notes and stuff when you're reading?
Yes, very heavily.
Okay, but yeah, I still want you to try and explain utility theory.
The top few. I've got actually the top points that I've learned from this book.
Oh, we can go through that once I guess. I'm not sure what the point we're discussing today is. Utility theory?
Just like loss aversion and risk aversion, and how we're so loss averse and how it affects so much of our life that we don't even realize.
So we're so loss averse. Discuss.
Yeah. Also, yeah, I was realizing as I was going through our timestamps last time that we really don't have. We don't talk about like one thing in one section, so it's really hard to timestamp sometimes.
But well, that's fine. We'll improve with time. What was I going to say? So I want you to try and explain.
No, but I don't remember.
Okay.
Because I just.
So, but this is.
I know it's something to do with utility and how much.
Okay, so utility theory explains individuals' choices and measures their level of satisfaction from consuming a good or service. I'm lost.
So it basically talks about how likely someone is to choose an option, like choose a gamble, like they talk a lot about gambling to also test the statistics. Like,
it says to measure their level of satisfaction from consuming a good or service.
Yeah.
So I'm just reading this verbatim. Utility theory explains individuals' choices and measures their level of satisfaction from consuming a good or service. And this is the graph that usually comes up. So you have like marginal utility on one side and quantity consumed. So it basically shows that like the less quantity you consume of something, the higher the marginal utility. But that doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't think
that's just one of the graphs.
Okay.
I don't know how the graph
works, but.
So utility means satisfaction gained by the customer from consumption of goods and services. Utility is defined by affordability of the customer to consume goods and services that will give satisfaction to the customer. And then we have theory of utility. Satisfaction received by a consumer or pleasure for consuming a good is a basis to make... Oh, okay, so that's the theory. Okay, I think we got it. satisfaction received by consumer or pleasure from consuming a good is a basis to make choice of goods and to value goods. Okay, this is jogging back my neuroeconomics, because it's basically saying that people should choose things based on the level of satisfaction that they gain from it. Okay,
yeah.
we got there.
Basically.
We got there.
People do choose things based on the level of satisfaction, which is kind of what drives sales.
Is saying that that's what we should do, but I'm guessing there are other theories as well, because like I'm trying to think. What do you think personally?
I think there's a lot.
Do you think people do that, and do you think you do that?
Based on what?
Just think of an example of anything. So I guess that's what we're doing here: how to better us and how to better other people, better ourselves.
Better us.
So how do we? I guess to bring it back home is, how do we think about it, and how should we try to think about it? So I guess in the first point of like, how do we think about it? So do I use my level of satisfaction? You were going to say something?
Yeah. No, you can.
No, I was literally just saying the question.
I think it's like, okay, so I think about it as like, okay, so I know that as a human being, my mind works in being as loss averse as possible, right? I want the least losses and the most gains, always, right? And I know this, and now once you start to really understand, you can see, where does this apply in my life? Like, where in my life have I kind of given so much importance to these losses where there was no point, like it wasn't really that deep, you know? Which is what a lot of people get hung up on, is like, okay, I had this one presentation that went really bad, my day's ruined, you know? Like I had this that went, because you took a loss. And that's fine, because you are loss averse, you're obviously that's going to hit you more than, okay, maybe you had a really bad presentation and then you had a nice phone call with someone, or you had your favorite thing for lunch. It probably actually won't even make you feel that good anymore, you know, because you're so focused on what went bad and what you lost throughout the day, you haven't really looked at what you've gained throughout the day.
Okay, that makes sense. But with regards to utility theory, though, because like utility theory is the fact that we choose what's best. I guess this is just paraphrasing. So essentially, utility theory is saying like we choose what's best for, or it's trying to explain how human beings choose things, and saying like, you know, they make their choices based on the level of satisfaction. And if like, I guess the anecdote or the explanation you're giving about the fact that, you know, if we focus so much on the loss averse thing, is that kind of counteracting the utility theory? Because like what you said about, because I think that affects it, because like what you said about the fact that, you know, for example, if you had I feel like I'm looking here more than I'm looking here. If you have a really like bad presentation today, now that phone call, which is something that's positive and was going to make you feel good, now doesn't make you feel good anymore. So if this is like utility theory saying like, you know, this is something that has a high level of satisfaction because of like how loss averse we are, that kind of, I shouldn't say take away from the theory, but that kind of appends like an extra term. Let's say like the equation is like y equals 2x. I know I'm a nerd, I'm just going to use equations. If like it was supposed to be like y equals 2x, and y is the level of satisfaction, x is like the input, and like, you know, on a scale, but this is like an ordinal, or is it cardinal scale? Anyway, it's not linear and we have different things for the x. It's not like x equals 1, x equals 2. It's more like x equals phone call, x equals having a nice spa day. But instead of it just being like, you know, y equals 2x, where like, you know, your level of satisfaction is based on that thing, now there's like an extra minus 50 because of that, you know, how loss averse we are.
It changes your seat. It changes your...
Yeah. But I guess if we're following utility theory is the way we think.
But that's what this book always covers. Utility theory is assuming that you are a rational person. But people are not rational. People will choose the unrational over the rational multiple times because of how they feel. How you feel is controlled by your brain's mechanism to survive. You always choose with certainty loss rather than the possibility of gain.
Yeah, but that's why that was, I guess, the question I was trying to reframe. Like, do you think, what kind of examples can you give in terms of like for utility theory and how we should either try to lean more into it or we should try to not lean into it? Because like what you're saying about us being loss averse, and you were saying like, you know, there are areas in your life where you feel like, you know, you're being so loss averse, and a rational being, as described by utility theory, wouldn't be doing this, and you're trying to change that. So I guess the question is like, what's an example and how can we lean more into this?
That is very interesting. Okay, let's try to think of an example. So let's create a setting. Let's say you're really depressed and you don't really want to get out of bed. And all you're focusing on.
So utility theory says if you get out of bed and go get a croissant from the train station, you will feel good because there's a level of satisfaction you're going to get from that.
Yeah.
But because you're so loss averse,
you're going to think, oh no, I had such a shit sleep. Oh no, I feel so shit today. Oh no, I have to get up and I have to get dressed. Oh no, I hate the way that I look. Oh no, like all these losses are going to keep playing again and again in your mind.
Or like someone's going to say I'm ugly when I go out. But
yeah.
But you should hold on to